Satan gets busy, but you gotta know when he's working so you can let God handle up on your behalf. This Facebook post sounds innocent enough, right? Maybe even inspiring. But here's the terrifying truth. The woman who wrote these words had just murdered her boyfriend and left his body to rot in their shared apartment. While 37-year-old Veanitta Lenon was posting about God and Satan on social media, Jason Bloomfield's corpse was decomposing just feet away from where she slept. For 6 days, she carried on like nothing happened. She went to work, she talked to neighbors, she even drove around in her dead boyfriend's car. But when Jason's 15-year-old son walked into that apartment, he discovered a horror that haunted him. And when police arrived, Veanitta put on the performance of her life, fake tears and all. Can you imagine? Drop a comment if you've ever had a gut feeling about someone that turned out to be right, because this case will make you question everyone around you. Welcome to this channel. Right now, there are thousands of people living with partners who are hiding dark secrets, just like Jason Bloomfield was. If you care about recognizing these red flags, if you want to help others spot the danger before tragedy strikes, then please like this video, share it, and subscribe to this channel. Your awareness could literally save a life. Jason Bloomfield was just an ordinary guy living an ordinary life in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. At 46 years old, he wasn't asking for much from life. He had his job at Burger King, where he showed up every day without fail. His coworkers could count on him. His manager knew he'd be there when scheduled. Jason loved the Miami Dolphins with a passion that only true fans understand. Win or lose, he supported his team. It was one of those simple pleasures that made him smile, even when times got tough. But the most important thing in Jason's world was his family. He had a 15-year-old son who meant everything to him. His mother was also a big part of his life. They were the kind of close-knit family that checked on each other regularly. When Jason didn't show up somewhere, people noticed. Jason shared an apartment with his girlfriend, Veanitta Lenon. From the outside, they seemed like any other couple trying to make it work. Sure, they had their problems, money was tight, and they were facing eviction, but nothing that seemed worth killing over. November 23, 2024 started like any other day for Jason. He had no idea it would be his last. He couldn't have known that the woman he trusted, the woman he shared a bed with, was about to end his life in the most brutal way possible. That evening, around dinner time, neighbors in their apartment complex heard something that would haunt them forever. 6 gunshots rang out from Jason and Veanitta's unit. 6 loud bangs that shattered the quiet of a regular Thursday night. Those neighbors had no idea they had just heard Jason Bloomfield's final moments. And they definitely didn't know that his killer was already planning her next move. The next morning, November 24th, something unprecedented happened. Jason Bloomfield didn't show up for work. His manager at Burger King stared at the schedule, then at the clock. Jason was supposed to be there. He was always there. In all the time he'd worked at the restaurant, Jason had never been a no-show. He was reliable, the kind of employee managers dream about. If Jason couldn't make it to work, he called. He gave notice. He was responsible. But not today. Today, there was just silence. The manager tried calling Jason's phone. It went straight to voicemail. He tried again an hour later. Still nothing. By the end of Jason's shift, concern was turning into worry. This wasn't like Jason at all. Meanwhile, Jason's family was starting to panic. His mother tried reaching him throughout the day. No answer. His son called and texted. Nothing. For a man who stayed in regular contact with his family, this silence was deafening. But while everyone else was worried sick about Jason, Veanitta Lenon was busy spinning her web of lies. When neighbors asked about the gunshots they'd heard the night before, Veanitta had her story ready. She told them with a straight face that a friend of hers had fired those shots nearby. Just some random incident that had nothing to do with her or Jason. She seemed calm, almost casual about it. When Jason's family called looking for him, Veanitta's story changed completely. She told them that she and Jason had broken up. According to her, Jason was cheating on her with his problematic ex-girlfriend, and she'd had enough. She made it sound like Jason had simply walked out of her life. The apartment that Jason and Veanitta shared became eerily quiet. Neighbors who were used to hearing the sounds of daily life, TV shows, conversations, footsteps, now heard nothing. It was as if the place had become a tomb. Days passed. Jason's absence at work continued. His family's calls went unanswered. His friends started asking questions. But Veanitta kept up her act, telling different stories to different people, always with an explanation for why Jason wasn't around. What none of them knew was that Jason was still in that apartment. He'd never left. He couldn't leave. And with each passing day, the evidence of what Veanitta had done was getting harder and harder to hide. Veanitta Lenon wasn't just some random girlfriend who snapped one day. She had a history that should have been a warning sign to everyone around her. Veanitta was born in Detroit, Michigan, but had moved to Florida years earlier. She'd lived in both Miami-Dade and Broward counties, bouncing around like someone always running from something. At just 4 feet 11 inches tall, she might have looked harmless to most people, but looks can be deadly deceiving. What really set off alarm bells was her criminal record. Veanitta was a convicted felon with a past that included multiple run-ins with the law. She wasn't some first-time offender who made a mistake. She was what prosecutors would later call a career criminal, someone who made breaking the law a way of life. But if you looked at Veanitta's Facebook page, you'd see a completely different person. She posted about God, work, family, and living comfortably. She shared inspirational quotes and talked about letting God handle her problems. To anyone scrolling through her posts, she looked like a woman of faith trying to turn her life around. The reality was much darker. Behind those religious posts was someone struggling with serious problems that were about to explode. Money was the biggest issue. Veanitta and Jason were broke, not just tight on cash, they were facing eviction from their Fort Lauderdale apartment. The stress of losing their home was crushing both of them, but it seemed to hit Veanitta especially hard. When people are desperate about money, they sometimes do desperate things. Their relationship was falling apart too. According to what Veanitta later told people, Jason was cheating on her with his ex-girlfriend. She described this other woman as problematic and claimed that's why she and Jason had broken up. But here's the thing. Investigators would later discover that this story about cheating was just another one of Veanitta's lies. The truth was that Jason and Veanitta were still living together when he died. They hadn't broken up. They were just two people under incredible pressure, trying to figure out how to keep a roof over their heads. But while Jason was probably thinking about picking up extra shifts at Burger King or finding a cheaper place to live, Veanitta's mind was going to much darker places. Her criminal past had taught her that rules didn't apply to her. Her Facebook posts about Satan getting busy weren't just random thoughts. They were the mindset of someone who was already planning something evil. The combination was toxic. A career criminal facing eviction, living with a man she claimed was betraying her, all while pretending to be a woman of faith on social media. These weren't just red flags. They were warning sirens that nobody heard in time. And Jason Bloomfield was about to pay the ultimate price for missing those signs. November 29, 2024. 5 days had passed since those gunshots echoed through the apartment complex. 5 days of silence. 5 days of unanswered calls and growing panic from Jason's family. His 15-year-old son couldn't take it anymore. Neither could Jason's mother. They'd been calling, texting, and worrying themselves sick. Jason would never just disappear like this. Something was terribly wrong, and they knew it, so they decided to go to the apartment and check on him themselves. Picture this moment. A teenage boy and his grandmother, walking up to an apartment door, probably arguing about who should knock first. They were worried, maybe even scared, but they had no idea they were about to walk into a nightmare that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. They knocked, no answer. They called out Jason's name, still nothing. Finally, they used their key to get inside. The smell hit them first. Anyone who's ever encountered death knows that smell. It's something you never forget. Sweet, sickening, and absolutely unmistakable. But they probably didn't recognize it right away. Maybe they thought something had gone bad in the fridge, or there was a plumbing problem. Then they found him. Jason Bloomfield's body was in a small bedroom, already in what police reports would later describe as advanced stages of decomposition. For 5 days, in Florida's heat and humidity, his body had been rotting away, while his killer went about her daily life. Imagine being that 15-year-old boy. Imagine walking into a room and finding your father's corpse, bloated and decaying. Imagine the scream that probably tore from his throat. Imagine his grandmother trying to shield him from the sight while fumbling for her phone to call 911. The 911 call that came in that day was probably one of the most heartbreaking dispatchers had ever received. A family member finding their loved one dead is tragic enough, but finding them like this, after days of decomposition, after wondering where they were and why they weren't answering their phone, it's the kind of trauma that changes people forever. Within minutes, police cars and ambulances were racing toward the Fort Lauderdale apartment. Crime scene investigators were called in. The medical examiner was notified. What had started as a missing person case was now officially a homicide investigation. But here's what makes this story even more chilling. While Jason's son and mother were discovering his body and calling for help, Veanitta Lenon was out there somewhere, probably thinking she'd gotten away with murder. What's the most shocking true crime case from your area? Let us know in the comments, because this story is about to get even more twisted. Just as police were securing the crime scene and trying to process what they were seeing, something incredible happened. Veanitta Lenon showed up. She pulled into the apartment complex parking lot driving Jason's silver BMW. Think about that for a second. She was driving her dead boyfriend's car to the scene where his body had just been discovered. The audacity was breathtaking. But what happened next was even more shocking. As soon as Veanitta saw the police cars and ambulances, she immediately started crying. Wailing, actually. Making a huge scene about how devastated she was to learn about Jason's death. There was just one problem. The police officer who watched her performance wrote something very specific in his report. He said Veanitta was fake crying with no tears. She was making all the sounds of someone who is heartbroken, but her eyes were completely dry. This wasn't grief. This was acting, and it was terrible acting at that. The officer's trained eye caught what family members might have missed in their own shock and pain. Veanitta was putting on a show, and she wasn't very good at it. Real grief doesn't look like a performance. Real tears don't turn on and off like a faucet. While Veanitta was busy with her fake crying routine, detectives were already starting to piece together what had really happened. They talked to the neighbors who'd heard those 6 gunshots on November 23rd. They spoke with Jason's manager at Burger King, who confirmed he'd never shown up for work after that date. Most importantly, they started looking at Veanitta's stories, and those stories were falling apart faster than she could tell them. Remember how she'd told neighbors that a friend had fired those gunshots nearby? Well, detectives checked. No reports of gunshots in the area that night, except from this apartment complex. No police calls about random shooting incidents. Her story was complete fiction. Then there was the story she'd told Jason's family about them breaking up because he was cheating. But if they'd broken up, why was she still living in the apartment? Why was she driving his car? Why hadn't anyone else heard about this breakup? The detectives weren't buying any of it. They'd seen enough crime scenes to know when someone was lying, and Veanitta's lies were so obvious they were almost insulting. As they processed the scene, more evidence started piling up. The body had been moved. Jason hadn't died in that small bedroom where they found him. There were signs that someone had tried to clean up blood. A couch had been moved to block the bedroom door. This was calculated. Someone had killed Jason, moved his body, tried to clean up the evidence, and then went on with their life for 5 days while his corpse rotted away, and that someone was standing right in front of them, fake crying without a single real tear. As detectives dug deeper into the case, Veanitta's web of lies opened up like a cheap sweater. Every story she'd told, every excuse she'd made, every tear she'd faked, it was all about to come crashing down. The first breakthrough came from technology. In today's world, your phone tells a story whether you want it to or not. Detectives pulled Veanitta's cell phone records and GPS data, and what they found was damning. Her phone showed she'd been at the apartment on November 23rd when those gunshots were fired. Not nearby, not visiting a friend, she was right there when Jason died. The GPS coordinates placed her exactly where the murder happened, at exactly the time it happened. But that wasn't even the most shocking part. Detectives discovered that after Jason was dead, Veanitta had been using his phone. She'd accessed his bank account and made Zelle transfers. Think about how cold that is. Your boyfriend is lying dead in the next room, and you're stealing his money. This wasn't some desperate woman grabbing cash to run away. The transfers happened over several days. She was methodically draining Jason's accounts while his body decomposed, just feet away from where she slept. The crime scene reconstruction painted an even more horrifying picture. Jason hadn't died in that small bedroom where his family found him. The blood evidence showed he'd been shot in the living room, probably while he was just sitting there, maybe watching TV or eating dinner. 6 gunshots. That's not someone who panicked and fired once. That's not self-defense. That's execution. Veanitta had emptied her gun into Jason, making sure he was dead. But then came the part that showed just how calculated this murder really was. After shooting Jason 6 times in the living room, Veanitta had dragged his body into the small bedroom. A 4-foot, 11-inch woman dragging a grown man's dead weight across an apartment floor. Can you imagine that scene? The blood trail, the effort it took, the complete lack of emotion required to grab your boyfriend's corpse and drag it like a piece of furniture. Detectives found evidence of all of this. Blood spatter in the living room, drag marks across the floor, signs that someone had tried to clean up the mess but hadn't done a very good job. The cell phone evidence also revealed something else that made investigators' blood run cold. While Jason's family was frantically calling and texting him, worried sick about where he was, Veanitta was reading those messages. She was watching his mother panic. She was seeing his son's desperate texts, asking where his dad was, and she did nothing. She let them suffer for 5 days, knowing exactly where Jason was and exactly what had happened to him. The GPS data showed Veanitta had left the apartment multiple times during those 5 days. She'd gone to work, she'd run errands, she'd driven around in Jason's car like nothing had happened, all while his body was rotting in their shared bedroom. But perhaps the most chilling piece of evidence was what she'd posted on Facebook during this time. Remember that post about Satan getting busy? She'd written that while Jason's corpse was decomposing in the next room. She was posting about God and Satan and letting divine justice handle things, all while she was literally living with the evidence of her own evil. Every lie she'd told was falling apart. Every story was being exposed as fiction. The evidence was overwhelming, and it all pointed to one terrifying conclusion. Veanitta Lenon had murdered Jason Bloomfield in cold blood, then spent 5 days living with his corpse while stealing his money and lying to everyone who cared about him. But Veanitta's crimes didn't end with pulling the trigger. What she did after the murder shows a level of calculation that's truly disturbing. After dragging Jason's body into the small bedroom, Veanitta went to work trying to erase the evidence of what she'd done. She grabbed Clorox bleach, rags, and a mop and started scrubbing away Jason's blood. Picture this scene. A woman on her hands and knees mopping up her boyfriend's blood like it was spilled coffee, the smell of bleach mixing with the smell of death. The methodical ways she cleaned, trying to make sure no trace of the murder remained. But cleaning up blood isn't as easy as it looks in the movies. Blood seeps into cracks, soaks into wood, leaves traces that forensic investigators can find even when you think you've cleaned everything. Veanitta learned this the hard way. After she finished cleaning, she moved a couch to block the bedroom door where Jason's body was hidden. This wasn't panic, this was planning. She was creating a barrier so that if anyone came to the apartment, they wouldn't accidentally discover what she'd done. But Veanitta had made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated how much Jason's family loved him. She'd counted on them giving up, accepting her lies, and moving on with their lives. She was wrong. And that mistake was about to cost her everything. The investigation took months, but detectives were building an airtight case against Veanitta Lenon. Every piece of evidence pointed to her. Every lie had been exposed. Every attempt to cover up her crime had failed. It was on May 2, 2025 that justice finally caught up with Veanitta. A patrol officer in Fort Lauderdale recognized her from the arrest warrant and took her into custody. After months of thinking she'd gotten away with murder, her freedom was over. But the legal system wasn't done with her yet. When prosecutors looked at Veanitta's criminal history, they saw a pattern that went way beyond this single murder. On May 5th, they filed what's called a career criminal felony case against her. This wasn't just about Jason's murder anymore. This was about a woman who had made crime her way of life, and the justice system was finally ready to hold her accountable for everything. The charges were serious: murder with a firearm and using a deceased person's personal information for fraud. That second charge came from her stealing Jason's money after she killed him, adding insult to the ultimate injury. On May 28th, Veanitta stood before a judge for her arraignment. This was her chance to admit what she'd done, to show some remorse for destroying Jason's family and ending an innocent man's life. Instead, she pleaded not guilty to all charges. Even with overwhelming evidence against her, even with her lies completely exposed, Veanitta was still trying to manipulate the system. She was still pretending to be the victim instead of the killer. The judge wasn't buying it. Bond was denied, meaning Veanitta would stay locked up at the Paul Ryan detention facility in Pompano Beach while she waited for trial. As of now, she's still there, still claiming innocence, still refusing to take responsibility for the cold-blooded murder of Jason Bloomfield. But the evidence speaks louder than her lies ever could. Veanitta's past should have been another major warning sign. She wasn't just someone who'd made a mistake years ago. She was a career criminal with a pattern of breaking the law. People don't usually go from petty crime straight to murder, but they do escalate when they feel cornered. The neighbors who heard those 6 gunshots should have called 911 immediately. Instead, they probably thought it was fireworks or a car backfiring. In today's world, we can't afford to ignore sounds like that. When you hear what might be gunshots, especially multiple shots, call the police. Let them decide if it's worth investigating. Jason's co-workers and family did everything right. They noticed when he disappeared and they took action. But imagine if they'd recognized the warning signs earlier. What if someone had seen how desperate Veanitta was getting about money? What if someone had questioned her constantly changing stories? We all need to be more aware of the people around us. Financial desperation, criminal history, constant lying, and social media posts that don't match reality, these are all signs that someone might be dangerous. Jason Bloomfield should still be alive today. He should be cheering for the Miami Dolphins, working his shifts at Burger King, and spending time with his son. Instead, he's gone because the woman he trusted decided his life was worth less than her convenience. This case teaches us that evil can hide behind religious posts and fake tears. It shows us that financial stress can turn deadly when it meets the wrong person. Most importantly, it reminds us that we all have a responsibility to watch out for each other. If you're in a relationship where money problems are causing constant fights, get help. If your partner has a criminal history and starts acting desperate, don't ignore it. If someone you know keeps changing their story about important things, Ask questions. If you're a neighbor who hears suspicious sounds, don't assume someone else will call for help. If you're a coworker who notices someone missing work without explanation, speak up. If you're a family member who gets weird explanations for why you can't reach your loved one, trust your instincts. Jason's 15-year-old son will carry the trauma of finding his father's body for the rest of his life. His grandmother will never forget that smell, that sight, that moment when their world fell apart. Veanitta Lenon didn't just kill Jason, she destroyed an entire family. But we can honor Jason's memory by learning from this tragedy. We can be more aware, more willing to speak up, and more ready to help when we see the warning signs. Subscribe if you want to stay informed about cases like these, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Because staying informed isn't just about entertainment, it's about protecting ourselves and the people we love from predators who are still hidden.